Bassi. It is Thanksgiving at 12:30 California time, Pacific Standard Time. And so that means many of you are probably having your Thanksgiving dinners all across the country. I did sneak away and do a little stuffing and potato making, and I'm going to get back on what I was doing for Thanksgiving today, but I wanted to come down for a second live stream down here at the Santa Clara County Courthouse because we are going to talk about one of the it was actually the second domestic violence case that I ever covered. It was out of Monterey, and that was after we were shut down from covering a case involving a 49er here in this Santa Clara County Courthouse that cost taxpayers $283 million to build. Good morning, G. Cotty Gal 1353. Can you guys let me know how the sound is on this? Because we're going to talk about the worst doctor divorce case that I have seen. And I don't think you're not going to believe this one. I also got a little tip that the Santa Clara County and the Orange County courts are calling emergency meetings for their minors counsel. There are some issues related to the cases involving attorneys appointed as minors counsel, and there was another death of a case. Before I get started on the doctor story, I want to show you. So I've covered many protests that have been here at this courthouse. I recorded Scott Largent getting arrested on that corner over there. Now, even though it's Thanksgiving too, I want to point out I'm not going to go on the court property. I would typically go all around the court property to do this live stream, but you might recall that Judge Julie Emedy, who is the first gay judge appointed to the Santa Clara County courts, has issued an order that prevents me and had it served on me. So if I were to violate that order, I would be arrested. And the order is a little overly broad because it's not clear whether or not I can record on court property when the courts are closed. And so I'm going to stay on the sidewalk with Puppy. Puppy might wander on and off the property, but I'm going to stay out here on the property. And, but I have covered protests out here for years. And one protest that was really interesting was years ago, there were several people protesting their minors counsel. Those are the attorneys who are appointed in a divorce or custody case to represent the children. And either the parents pay those individuals or taxpayers do. And it is a huge waste of public resources because these attorneys are getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars and either from private or public funds, and it's really not defined what they're even supposed to do. And oftentimes parents will find that their children have an attorney during their divorce when they can't afford to pay one. And it's one of the things that I have been really focusing my reporting on, the Davis Vanguard and everything else. But one year there was a woman sitting up there. I'll zoom in to show exactly where she was sitting. She was sitting right there, and I have a picture of her of a sign holding a picture of her niece. And her niece was Alicia Massetti. And Alicia Massetti had a minors counsel in her case, and her mother was too poor to afford an attorney. And the father hadn't been paying child support, had had a number of criminal charges against him, and kept getting out of those criminal charges. Again, thank you to the district attorneys that are not dealing with these issues as a matter of public safety. If they happen in family court, the district attorneys typically won't even touch them. And so Alicia Massetti's aunt sat right up there when the sheriffs were marching around the protesters. He's pulling on my camera a little bit. Hold on, let me switch hands. Okay, but she Okay, I'm checking sound. Okay, can you hear me now? I'm going to check. I'm not going to keep talking until you guys. Okay, I had to switch microphones. I have both batteried up. So thank you to the guy that sent me these microphones, two of them. They're both charged, and I'm doing two live streams. So this morning I did a live stream about one of my Women SV sources on the nonprofit Women SV. That's a domestic violence nonprofit. It was a total sham. The county was sending that woman $250,000 of our money, and the private money was just pouring to them because she was basically raising money for these divorce attorneys, high asset divorce cases. So if you're following my work on Women SV, that this morning's live stream was a little about that. So before we get into the doctor case and why you should never marry a doctor that could get you a divorce like this one out of Monterey, I just wanted to give a shout out to the aunt of Alicia Massetti, who sat right up there in defiance of the police and holding a sign for her niece, who was unlived by her father after minors counsel recommended that she should go live with him because the mother couldn't afford to pay an attorney or support her. And that happened in Stanislaus County. The father was convicted, criminal case over there. So that kind of connects our courts and that court. And Julie Emedy at the time was the presiding judge of the family court. And I don't know if you heard, but she's the one that issued the order that I'm not allowed to film on that court property, which is why I'm not walking up on the property, even on Thanksgiving. And when Julie Emedy was asked by the San Jose Mercury to comment on that case and minors counsel and everything else, she said, "Oh, we missed the signs." That was her actual quote in the San Jose Mercury. And what we didn't know at the time was that Julie Emedy was sitting in a little bar bench media police committee club with those Mercury reporters. So that means that there wasn't a record back and forth about how Julie Emedy was contacted for comment. They could just go down there and talk about anything they wanted to. And I've been reporting on that bar bench media police committee for a long time. But I assure you that Julie Emedy is a liar because they didn't miss the signs. They know exactly what minors counsel is doing, and they have not made it better. They have made it worse. And I am informed that there has been an emergency minors counsel meeting scheduled in December in this court to address the issue of minors counsel, and that the meeting is mandatory for anybody who wants to continue to be appointed as minors counsel in 2026. My hunch is that that is a result of Nicole Ford, who is a minors counsel, was appointed in over 140 cases. She is also appointed to the political body of the Domestic Violence Council, and she and Judge Hendrickson and Casey Halcone, who was the director of victim services, were the ones that approved the $250,000 in grant money to Women SV. So for those of you who are keeping track, Cindy Hendrickson is the judge that Father in Exile is currently suing. And Cindy Hendrickson it has been announced that she will no longer be um, in family court and is resigning. And the story that the court is telling is that she is resigning because she was too chummy with attorneys like Nicole Ford. And the reality is, I think she's resigning because I filed a CJP complaint about her, and not only complained about her kicking two members of the public out of a public courtroom, but also that her social media accounts continued to broadcast images of attorneys who had endorsed her that she was appointing as minors counsel. And I also pointed out that when she responded to a disqualification about her relationship with Women SV, that she was less than truthful, because I had the news coverage to show that Cindy Hendrickson has been supporting Women SV since 2014. And Jane Doe 1, who we talked about at this morning's live stream, told me that Ruth Patrick was using a nonprofit to endorse both the district attorney and Cindy Hendrickson's political campaigns. And just so you guys know, nonprofits are not allowed to be political. So this nonprofit was keeping certain judges in office and keeping the district attorney in office, and we know those individuals are a problem for all of us. So I wanted to give that shout out, and then I want to tell you about the doctor case. So the doctor case involved, after I had started covering DV cases and custody cases, I think I had known about minors counsel, but really hadn't heard the noise on that yet. And I learned of a case in Monterey County. And if you look back through my videos, long before I met the cop watchers, some of my old videos are really clunky. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't film in the horizontal position. I didn't know how to edit. I really wasn't making videos the way that I should have. And here's Peppy trying to, she really doesn't like this place either, I don't think. And so I learned about a case in Monterey County, and I filed a media request. And back in 2017, when there was in these courtrooms, we all had transcripts. And in Monterey County, they have transcripts. In Orange County, they've continued to have transcripts when Santa Clara County has not. And it is my view that transcripts in and not allowing cameras in courtrooms is probably the greatest injustice that we have in our court system in California, because over 1 million hearings are held every year and there's no more record of it. So I was so used to my media requests here in Santa Clara County being denied that when I made one in Monterey County, I was actually really surprised when that was granted. And this case was a case where a woman was married to a doctor. A doctor, um, his name was Jonathan Annis, and he recently passed away. And so we know the end of that story and how that went. But Jonathan Annis was convicted of felony crimes related to pill farms, overprescribing, something like that, out of the Midwest, out of Chicago. And then he moved here and he married either his second or third wife, and her name was Julie Law. And Julie Law, they were starting to have some marital problems. They had some children together. And Julie Law went away for a weekend with a friend up to the city. There was some kind of convention or something going on. And when she came home, he had kicked her out of the house, made a false DV report, and she didn't really know what to do with that. She hired a criminal defense attorney, and hang on. She hired a criminal defense attorney, and the criminal defense attorney said, "Oh, you're probably going to need a divorce attorney, and you should call Deborah Crawford. She's my ex-wife." And so she did. She hired Deborah Crawford. And for those of you who remember that movie, Mommy Dearest, I always think of that when I think of Joan with Deborah Crawford, because in Mommy Dearest, it was about, I believe Joan Crawford was the actress in that movie. And it was about horrific treatment of a child. And it was the first time that as a kid, I really saw that women could just be really horrible to their children. And I hadn't ever experienced that kind of treatment, and I didn't really know it existed. And that movie kind of gave us some insight into mothers that are problematic in raising their children. And so I always refer to Deborah Crawford informally as Mommy Dearest, because she was the stepmother from hell for sure. So Julie Law hires Deborah Crawford, and Deborah Crawford gets her divorce from Dr. Annis. And there was issues related to alimony and child support and division of their community property. And then Julie Law finds out that her criminal defense attorney, he was hitting on her a lot. And then she finds out that his ex-wife, her divorce attorney, was mad about that. She was jealous. And so she starts dating her clients. I'm going to say this real slowly so you understand this. Deborah Crawford starts dating her former client's ex-husband. Okay, so you got that? Dr. Annis was her client's former husband. She starts dating him and then she marries him. And then she gets a domestic violence restraining order against her former client, and she gets a restraining order. So for trying to enforce the court orders about how they would handle mail, tax issues, and other things, she was restrained from contacting her ex-husband or her attorney and wasn't able to get anything done. They just basically locked her out of the courts. And the courts, they all knew this was going on. All the judges and attorneys knew this was going on. And they literally let this woman be under all these restraining orders. And so I did a media request because I couldn't believe what I was hearing in that case. And the judge in Monterey County, surprisingly enough, granted my media request. And I have the transcripts in that. And at the very beginning of the case, she said that the public has a right to oversee these DV cases because we all have a right to know if someone's making up a false allegation of abuse. Hang on, I'm switching hands again. A false allegation of abuse or a real allegation. And if somebody is, you could maybe date one of those people later on. And so the public has a right to see those cases. Well, at the same time, I was covering that 49er case here in Santa Clara County, and Judge Towery closed the courtroom and the court files were sealed. So, how do you know about these issues that are of extreme public importance in one county and then they don't even disclose to the public that that's going on? So, whenever I think about when someone tells me that they're marrying a doctor or married to a doctor, I always think of Julie Law's case. And I think of that divorce very similarly to how I think about Kathy Fike's case that we covered the other day. And what was really interesting was after I got that media request granted, um, the attorney that was handling the divorce case for Deborah Crawford, because there was clearly a conflict of interest, was Catherine Dorsett. And Catherine Dorsett has been involved in some horrific custody cases in Santa Clara County where the cases were confidential, so you couldn't see the public files, but we saw what she was doing. Uh, Chris Black, thank you very, very much for that. Chris Black is in Orange County. Chris Black, by the way, has sued Brian Barron for malpractice. And her attorney in that lawsuit has passed away, and she's currently representing herself. But Chris Black was in a deposition related to that malpractice case when it came out that one of the children that Brian Barron represents in Orange County had passed away. So she is going to put some links, and I mentioned this in my earlier live stream, that are for the GoFundMe for the funeral for that child. Again, I'm not making any allegations or reporting on that case other than that the child was represented by Brian Barron. There were allegations about whether or not the child should be in the custody of the father. And the child had gotten several broken bones, reportedly, and the child is no longer alive. And the mother is seeking to raise money for the child's funeral expenses. And so, Chris Black, if you could put a link to that GoFundMe in these comments, people can go there and find that. But not only put them now while they're live, but also put it after I finish the live and this video stays up. We're going to walk because Peppy is tired of standing here. So we're going to walk to the back side of the courthouse. Because this really is, every time I walk up and down this area, whether court's in session or not, it reminds me of all the protests and all the people who have contacted me to talk about minors counsel, private judges, and that kind of thing. The best we can do is assure public access and that this information is out to the public. And as we talked about in yesterday's live stream, I hope that what we do here on this platform will be for the legal profession and judges as cop watchers have been to policing, because we really need to be able to clean up what's going on in our courts. and it affects taxpayers, it affects families, and it is really problematic when these bad attorneys are representing children or acting as private judges, and the public court judges that we pay are not doing anything about it. Okay, it looks like I lost sound again. I'm going to plug back in the new microphone. Can you guys hear that? Because I don't know if you heard the last part, because I was talking about the 3 lawsuits. Let me plug back in. I was talking about 3 lawsuits against Nicole Ford. We were on the Jeff Haskell lawsuit. And okay, I don't know how long my sound was off. I really try to look at that. I'm reading your comments. I don't know when it went out. So I'm going to back up a little bit. We're talking about this emergency minors council meeting and if it is in fact being called because the courts are starting to realize that they may have some vicarious liability in appointing minors counsel who do not have malpractice insurance or who might be paying a lot of money and for malpractice insurance because they've been sued. And that applies to Brian Barron, who was sued by Christy Black down in Orange County. And Brian Barron is a frequently appointed minors counsel. And it also applies to Nicole Ford, who has been sued 3 times, um, once by a visitation provider in 2022, once by me in 2023, along with the district attorney, and once in 2025 or 4 by Jeff Haskell. And when you apply for malpractice insurance as an attorney, the forms that I've seen that sometimes get mailed to me in my post office box require attorneys to disclose to their malpractice insurance carriers that they have been sued. And so Nicole Ford being sued 2 times in federal court and 1 time in small claims court by a supervised visitation provider is kind of interest because either she's paying a lot of money to stay insured and passing that money on to her child clients and their parents, or she might not be insured and she's not currently on the panel. So, for those of you who ever have to deal with a minors counsel, there are rules about how judges are supposed to appoint these attorneys. And we find that, especially under Judge Emity's supreme leadership here in Santa Clara County, they're just not following those rules. They're appointing attorneys who are not on the panel. And if you look on the court website, there is a panel of minors counsel attorneys that have signed forms that say that they have qualified by taking an 8-hour course each year, that they have malpractice insurance. And Nicole Ford hasn't been on that list since 2022, but the judges here continue to appoint her, including Judge Zucker, Judge Hendrickson, who are both left. Cindy Hendrickson will be leaving the court in 2026, and she will be replaced by Yvette Pennypacker, who used to be sitting in civil court over there across the street. So if you guys recall, I covered a malpractice case a few months ago involving a private judge where the court, Judge Sabin in that case, issued an order. A motion in limine was filed asking that the jury not hear anything about private judging, and that was granted. So when we're reporting on these cases, we are reporting on attorneys who are sued for malpractice because that is a real complaint that we can follow. There's public filings on it. But in the case where the Deborah Crawford married her client's doctor ex-husband, there was never a malpractice case. And when there's not a malpractice case timely filed, we see these attorneys retaliating with restraining orders and with other issues. And so it's a fine line because it costs a lot of money to file a malpractice lawsuit, to pay for the depositions, to pay the jury fees and everything else. So we're looking at the cost of what bad cops cost us, what bad attorneys cost us, and what bad judges cost us. And I'm going to continue to report on that. And we're going to continue to look at whether or not these courts are appointing minors counsel who don't have insurance. And somebody reminded me that back in the day, a long time ago, around the 1930s, when the Depression was going on, that people who had fire insurance would post signs outside their homes saying, "We have fire insurance." There's a noisy motorcycle here. Let me let that pass. And when the fire department came out, if you had fire insurance, they would work to save your home because that would mean less expense to the insurance. He ran the red light. That was awesome. Loudly ran the red light. And so the fire department would let your house burn down if you did not have malpractice insurance. And that's effectively what's happening if these minors council are being sued and they no longer have malpractice insurance. That's putting the courthouse on fire because the courthouse knows what these minors council are doing. We've complained, we've reported, and they continue to appoint attorneys that are not qualified and that continue to engage in misconduct. So we're going to continue to look at that. We're going to continue to look at, and let me explain why that's important. The law says that if the court's going to give attorneys to children and taxpayers are going to pay that cost, then those children should have good representation and they should have attorneys who have malpractice insurance. And when you hire a divorce attorney, the attorneys that have malpractice insurance are going to charge you more. They're going to charge more for retainers, they're going to charge more for fees, and they're going to shift that cost to you. And so if the children these attorneys are representing don't have malpractice insurance, then when they turn 18 and can sue their minors counsel, those minors counsel won't have insurance. And if they don't have assets, those children would have nowhere to get financial relief from their claims. And so it's a big deal. That's what vicarious liability means. It means, like, similar to Julie Emity saying we missed the signs on minors counsel when Alicia Massetti um, was unlived by her father, and there was a minors counsel in that case, and that aunt came out here and had been protesting. They didn't miss the signs. They haven't missed the signs about Nicole Ford and what she's been doing in these minors counsel cases, and they probably didn't miss the signs with Brian Barron, who has also been sued for malpractice. So when these attorneys are sued, it doesn't even necessarily mean that somebody is able to win, that they have the money and ability to keep up fighting those cases. If you look at Father in Exile and the people he's sued, look at how much effort that is taking him. And not everybody is willing to do that. So those attorneys get away with misconduct, and so do the judges. So I did a lot of talking today, and I did it without really reading your comments. I wanted to get in the information about my media request being granted in the doctor case, the doctor who married his ex-wife's attorney, Deborah Crawford. I also want to add that Deborah Crawford and Catherine Dorsett, when after I did that, got that media request granted in that case, I took a picture of Catherine Dorsett because she was doing something shady outside the courtroom, and I had had a media request granted, and I thought it was important. And she tried to report me to the Santa Clara County District Attorney, who was prosecuting me for photographing the cop who broke my hand in that courtroom. And so all of these attorneys are filing restraining orders against me, trying to prevent me from recording, trying to prevent me from talking. And so if we can see you guys putting together information from my live streams and what we're hearing, then that's going to really shut that down. And I really do think that we can make a difference in how we're covering the courts and make an impact, just like cop watchers have made an impact. So if you did come into these live streams today and you aren't watching football or cooking or sitting down with your families, I appreciate your time. And if you didn't have an opportunity to, I'm going to leave this up so that you guys can listen later on. I think it's important information. And I hope that you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And we'll be back tomorrow morning with our video of Mark the Process Server talking about the Falcone and Fike divorce case that we addressed in our live stream yesterday. So happy Thanksgiving, everyone. This is my last live of the day. Could you guys, before I go out, could you guys hear sound in that? I just want to make sure the sound was on the whole time. It might be why a lot of people dropped off. Whoever says my doctor is a woman, well, if you were Catherine Dorsett, that probably wouldn't stop you from marrying her. And whoever said Susan is leading YouTube and uncovering family court corruption, a true American. I appreciate the comment. And I just hope that everything was in there. We talked about minors counsel and we talked about the DV case involving Dr. Annis and his new wife, who was the former divorce attorney for his other wife, his ex-wife. So let's keep talking about these DV cases and how the courts are handling them, minors counsel, and private judging. Thanks, you guys.